After that, I turned to drugs. Started with a little weed, which I don't see nothing wrong with that. But then, I it wasn't doing enough. I needed something harder, so I moved over to crystal meth. Um, I dealt with crystal meth for a while and was driving the truck on it. And
chicken trucking, big wheels there humming, high rate of fuel consumption, missing mama, needing loving, rolling with the weight of sound, running like a southern shaker. I don't need no 40 acres to turn this rig around.
Welcome back to Trucking Fitness Radio, the number one driver's health and fitness podcast in the world. My name is Mark Manera. I am the founder and CEO of the Trucking Fitness Company. I'm also a physical therapist, and I am really excited to have you listening to this episode. As you're aware, we are on a mission to make the trucking industry a healthier place, and this podcast is just one of the ways that we're doing that. So today, we've got a pretty awesome guest on the podcast, Jason Weber, who has been driving for years, got an amazing story that I'm excited to hear about. And also he's the Alabama Trucking Association's 2020 Truck Driver of the Year runner-up. So he's got some trucking industry fame there too, and some hardware to go along with it. But before I introduce Jason, I wanted to let you know, did you know you can come on the podcast? We are getting drivers to come on the show. If you want one-on-one help from me and we can talk about your situation and I'll give you actionable advice on how to live a healthier life on the road, or if you want to be like Jason and come on and just share your story and have a platform to help drivers either in the physical or mental health aspect of trucking, we want to be that platform for you. So if you're interested in either of those and you want to come on the show, we want to hear from you. So go to the link in our show notes or jump over to truckingfit.com/radio. So truckingfit.com/radio and fill out our show application. It takes 3 minutes. So do it. As we grow, more and more people are going to be applying and it's going to be harder for you to get on the show. So to thank you for being early, we want to give you access to come on and be a guest and share your story. So let's get into the show today. Today, we are talking to Jason, who is a friend of mine and also a truck driver down in Alabama. And I think he drives all over the place, but home base is Alabama. And he has been a member of the Trucking Fitness Company for a couple of months. So I'm excited to kind of hear his story and hear his thoughts on his experience with the Trucking Fitness Company's program too. But Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think before we kind of dive too deep into this, there was an article written, the Alabama Trucking Association, the ATA, wrote an article about you a year or so ago, and it kind of opened up about your story and just your experience in the trucking industry and getting in and telling your story. So I'd love to start there and just giving, the people listening just a background on how you got to where you are today.
Well, when I was little, I had a rough life, like most guys. Daddy never believed in anything that I done. Didn't believe in me. He just pushed me to be like him. Basically, is it. Um, but he always told me I'd never be good enough for anything. Never amount to anything like that. And it was, I would call it negative reinforcement instead of positive reinforcement like they call it today. So it would after so long, it would put a drive in me to prove him wrong, and get me out there. And then nothing could stop me once that happened. Once I made up my mind, I'm tired of hearing it. I'm going to prove him wrong. I'd get out there and failure was not an option then. No matter how many times I failed, that drove me even harder to make sure I succeeded at it. And, growing up, Daddy was paranoid schizophrenic. So I was raised by a paranoid schizophrenic. Mama worked. He was mentally uh, incapable of working. So he actually raised me. And I've got two other brothers, and my sister passed away in 2015. And they were there when Daddy had his actual breakdown when it actually showed up. And, it was one of those moments where um, it scared them so bad that they didn't want to be around him no more. And they, they went and lived with grandma. And then I came along as a, uh-oh, baby. It was one of menopause baby issues, and completely unexpected. And, so I got raised by him. And the other ones, they knew a whole different person than I knew growing up, because they had him before he was sick. And then he raised me after he was sick. So I got used to it. He's my hero. But yet, according, in their life, he went from hero to villain overnight, and with that, growing up in that aspect of having to be able to see two different ways people look at him, and then watching him and seeing him struggle but make it through, to deal with everything. And it pushed me. If Daddy owned his own business, he was a master carpenter. When he would go in to build a house, he would start with nothing but a plain field. When he got done, he was handing you the key to walk in your new house. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but the man was, he was a genius with numbers and tape measures and figuring out angles and geometry and all that stuff. And for me to sit back and watch this man that didn't have any education, he dropped out of school in 3rd grade. And he struggled with paranoid schizophrenia on top of that. And to see him successfully own his own business and to get out and do everything that he done, I mean, if he can do it, what in the world stopping everybody else,
Wow.
And so that kind of drove me, that and the negative reinforcement of Daddy telling me I could never do nothing when, the whole world basically told him he could. And so I never let nothing stop me. If I see an obstacle in front of me, it don't matter how bad it gets me down. If I want to overcome it, I do, period. And, when I was growing up, that was always, the big kicker is I never believed in failure. Failure to me, it's a saying I've got is, how, if you never try and you never fail, how will you know the success of failure? I mean, most millionaires will tell you, they failed 10 to 14 times before they were successful. So if you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to be successful. And if you do get out and are successful straight off the bat, you don't understand the whole aspect of what could go wrong. And, and it makes people arrogant if they do that sometimes. Not everybody, of course, but, a lot of people, if they are successful their first try, then there's something that could be a lot better in that aspect, and that they haven't looked at, because all they see is, oh, well, I was successful with this, so this is as far as I'm going. There's no telling how much further they could go. And with people that's in depression, or, are down and out, people telling them, that oh, you're nothing, or oh, this is as far as you can go, whatever. Let it put a drive in you. Don't just sit back and say, well, this one said I was this, and I've been there. I've when I was 16, Daddy grabbed me by the throat and picked me up, and I just got my first job, and he walked in there and tried to wake me up, and reached down, grabbed me by the throat, and picked me up out of bed. I had the flu. I couldn't get out of bed, and I shoved him off of me. I ran in. I grabbed his shotgun out of the gun cabinet and pointed it toward the door, and it was old pump 12 gauge, and I racked it and I put it to his head, and I told him if he touched me again, I'd blow his head off. And because when he put his hand around my throat, it scared me.
Yeah.
And because of me knowing his situation with his mental illness and stuff, and
you're only 16.
Yeah. So, but what got me afterwards, it wasn't the fact of what Daddy done, and it wasn't the fact of Daddy being mentally ill like he was. What got me was the fact I was able to do that, put my finger on the trigger and not feel anything. And then I got to looking back, and I'm like, why didn't I feel something there? And I got to looking back, and Daddy wasn't never really one of the timeout type of people. He was more of the pull the belt off and you're gonna learn your lesson type. Well, I lied to him, and he told me never to lie to him. And when I was 6, I did, over a pack of cigarettes that I stole and ran in the bedroom and smoked. But he got me. He was so angry that he pulled his belt off and wrapped it around his hand. And when he did, he didn't realize he had the belt part in his hand, not the buckle. Well, he started hitting me with the buckle end, and from my neck to my ankles, he started hitting me, and he just didn't stop. And he was a avid turkey hunter, and he done turkey calling competitions. And for most people that they're not familiar with that, they give out belt buckles, kind of like a rodeo gives out belt buckles, except theirs ain't that big around, but I had the buckle up till not too long ago. And but what it is that the buckle is imprinted with a big turkey and a big banner on top. It's roughly about that big around.
Mhm.
And that's what I got hit with. So I had whelps of a turkey and the writing, of 1986, turkey calling champion. And I had the whelps in me. And so when Mama got home at night, she walked in, and I was walking around. She seen my neck. She seen it on my neck. She come over and raised my shirt, and then she pulled my britches down, seen it all the way down, and she told me to go in the bedroom and get my clothes that we were leaving. And when I walked in there, I remember hearing her, and she was hollering at Daddy. Daddy wasn't saying anything. And when I walked out, she's like, "Come on, we're going to live with your grandma." And I walked right over there and sat down by Daddy, and told her I wasn't going nowhere. I got what I deserved. I lied to him, so I got my punishment. That to me, and the way that all that teaching that Daddy put through in me, I got what I deserved. I done wrong. I had to be punished. And granted, I didn't have to be punished that bad, but at that time, punishment's punishment. Don't matter how bad or how easy or how hard it is. If you do wrong, punishment's punishment. That's like with murderers. Some of them go on death row, straight out of court, and some of them go in for 5 years, get out on bond. Well, they're punished for the same crime that they committed, but one of them is more severe than the other. So, to me, that's the way I looked at it. Was I got punishment no matter how severe, how light. And it shocked her that I wanted to do that, but I realized that day is when my depression started. That's where I got numb, because he whooped me with that belt buckle so long that I finally quit feeling anything when he was hitting me. My body went numb. I wasn't crying no more, nothing else. And it took that point when I was 16 with that gun in my hand to realize here inside, I didn't have any feeling. I was numb. There was nothing there. And so I kept going, and my brother, when I was 7 years old, my brother started truck driving, and I'd see all the trucks on the interstate and stuff. And he took me for a ride with him over to Birmingham one night, and for a little night run to run around and deliver locally. And I got to ride in his truck, and I mean, that's where it started. After that was my dream. I wanted to be a truck driver.
Yeah, addicted.
So
yeah.
So when I turned 21, I went ahead and went and got my truck driving school over with, got my CDLs. Went through a hard time at that moment uh, with the wife that I was currently married to. And apparently, I left out, was on training. Um, apparently, her and my best friend apparently were meant to be together and not me and her. And so about 4 weeks into my training, uh, I was in Loveland, Colorado, hadn't been home yet. And I called her on back then it was payphones. Not everybody was at that time, not everybody had cell phone. So I called her from it and she told me she wanted a divorce right there. She couldn't even wait till I got home to tell me face to face. You know. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll be home in a couple of days, maybe a week, and we'll sit down face to face and we'll try to work this out. And she told me not to worry about coming home, that she had done made up her mind. I came home anyway, and I almost had I almost had a mental breakdown at that point because I didn't know what I was going to do. I had 2 kids by this woman, and it was December 14th, 2000. And so I got home, dealt with all that. After that, I turned to drugs, started with a little weed, which I don't see nothing wrong with that. But then, it wasn't doing enough. I needed something harder. So I moved over to crystal meth. I dealt with crystal meth for a while and was driving the truck on it. And boy, did it help with that paycheck. But I was to the point I was spending $2,000 a week on it, and my paycheck was $2,300 a week, but I was using it to make that $2,300 a week paycheck. So I was still only making I was making less than I would if I ran, legal and plain. I was turning 2 trips to California a week. And now I look back and go, well, I done that. Nobody ever knew I was on it. So how many other drivers out here that we pass every day is on this stuff that we never even realized we're passing?
That's kind of scary to think about. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And but it got to the point there where I finally, one night I done $2,500 worth, and in one sitting. This is while I was with my second wife, and basically the same situation. Except she was a drug addict too. Well, she wanted drugs more than she wanted me, so I found her and her dealer in the hotel room, and so I went off and I got my drugs and sat down and with the guy that actually cooked all the stuff, and I smoked $2,500 worth of it in one night. I was up for 14 days. My brain had done shut down. I showed up at the last place I knew I lived because I couldn't remember anything hardly, which ended up being my first ex's aunt's house because they bought it from us when we split up. And I walked in. I was trying to kick them out of the house and everything else, and finally they got somebody over there that I knew, and he had to convince me he knew me, and then he took me home and either told me flat out to either go to sleep or he was going to knock me out and make me go to sleep. So I did. Slept for 4 days, and I got up, and he was still sitting there in the recliner right next to me. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I turned and looked at him, and this is where my whole entire life changed. You hear people, you hear them talk about tough love or, brutal honesty or anything like that. That's where my life changed, because I looked at him and I said, what would you have told my kids if I hadn't have never woke up, if I'd have died? And he looked me dead in the eyes and no remorse on his face whatsoever, and said, I'd told them you loved your drugs more than you did them. And that's where my whole life changed, right there with that statement. Brutal honesty sometimes is the best medicine. And when he told me that, I said, I'd never again. I can't let my kids think that I love something else more than them, because at the time they were my world. And So I laid it down cold turkey right there and walked away from it. I found my reason to live.
Oh,
So, and
oh my
and
God.
in 2013, um, I found out my daughter wasn't mine. We done a, I had, I was married to my third wife then, and me and her were high school sweethearts. And she had a daughter, and the whole thing is, it was right around the time that we split up when she got pregnant. So we never knew whose it was actually, because there again, high school, and so the daughter kind of looked like me, because we were high school sweethearts. We split up for so long, then we got back together and got married, and which some people would call a fairy tale, and I'm not sure if that's called a fairy tale or a nightmare, but yeah, uh, but yeah, we went and got the little at-home DNA test stuff. Gonna do that, and so we done it. But my daughter was over that weekend, and the the one who we thought might be, she was scared to do the DNA test. She didn't know what it consisted of, and she asked my daughter if she'd do it with us. I didn't have no issues with that. It was my daughter. I knew she was mine. Yeah, well, we took it, and neither one of them was mine. So that's how we found out. And
Holy
then,
crap.
yeah, that was fun. Um, and then after that, I went, and because of that issue, then we went to court, and we had to get a DNA test done on both of my children, and my son was mine. If you've seen him, you'd understand there's no way I could deny him. Um, but uh, because of that fact, of me doing the DNA test, my first ex-wife, she didn't like me anyway because I was a truck driver, and I never could tell them when I'd be home and when I
Mhm.
wouldn't. I'd tell them, hey, look, I'll be home. This is my scheduled home time, and they get excited, and then I'd call and tell her, hey, look, Lowe's just didn't work out. I can't get there, and so she'd tell them, well, your daddy just don't want to be around you. He's making excuses again, and all this, um, but because of that DNA thing, she came after me hard and heavy, wanting me to sign over rights to my son. And so in 2013, I signed over rights to my son. I tried like crazy not to. I mean,
Yeah.
I done everything, and I ended up homeless. I lost everything I had. Um, Me and that third wife, the whole deal came in between us, and she was after me for my paycheck. She wasn't after me for me. She wanted my paycheck, and that's all she wanted. That's all it was to her. So we called it quits there. My dad had just died August 2012. Um, Here I am now. I've lost my house. I've lost my pickup truck. I lost my family. I've lost, you know, uh, my kids, and eh, I'm sitting under a bridge trying not to sign over rights to my son. I was working a 60-hour week at at a little plant doing the yard shuttles, and anything over 40 was overtime. And because of the child support that I had gotten, um, every week after that 60-hour week, they were hitting me, and after taxes and insurance and child support was coming out, I was making 14.75 an hour, and I brought home $65 a week. I couldn't I couldn't get a motel room because I had to I had to buy gas. I was
Mhm.
living in a pickup truck that a buddy of mine let me borrow because he was letting it go back, and it was just sitting in the yard. So he let me borrow it so I'd have something to stay in. I had all my clothes in it, and that was everything I owned. Um, and then So I couldn't go but X number of miles away from my job. And people think, that just because people are homeless out there that, hey, they're bums. They ain't, I'm here to tell you, I was homeless, living under a bridge, working 60 hours a week, all because I couldn't get no assistance from the DHR or anybody else. I walked in there and showed them pay stubs for 3 weeks and asked them, is there any way that I can get something, somewhere to stay, some food, something? And they looked at it and said, no, you gross too much. It don't matter about how much you bring home. It's about how much you gross. That's all people care about. And so I had to sign over the rights to get the child support stop so I could live, because it was either be homeless and not be able to see my son, period, and and live the rest of my life like that, and still not be able to see him. Just know I paid child support, and or don't pay child support, get locked up, and still not be able to see him. Either way, I wouldn't be able to see my son. And so the last time I got him, I told him, what was going on, and me and him sat down and we talked. And he told me, he said, Daddy, that's what Mama wants anyway. Just go ahead and give it to her. It'll be fine with me. I understand. He understood everything. So that's what I done. And after that, I felt like, nothing in the world was worth living for. And so one night, about a week later, I put a gun to my head, and, and my mind was racing, because being alone and having nothing but your thoughts, it can drive you insane. And if you don't have anybody to reach out to, nobody to talk to, no stories to listen to, anything like that. And at that moment, I didn't have anybody, and I couldn't stay with none of my friends, because it would interfere with their family deal, because I worked at night and everybody else worked during the day. And I'd have to be at home with some of them's wives and kids during the day while I slept on the couch, and then they'd have to be quiet. And I didn't want to interfere with nobody else's. I didn't want to be a burden to anybody.
Oh.
And so that's the way I seen it. Even though I had a couple of them that offered me help, they lived 40 miles away, further than what I could drive, but they couldn't, and all they could do was offer me a couch to sleep on. I wasn't gonna ask them for money or food or nothing else. Well, I didn't have the money to actually drive that far to stay there. So, there again, it's another one of them. If I'd done that, then I would lose my job and everything else, because I wouldn't be able to go. And I got thinking about all that, and got to thinking about the people that were there close enough that I could turn to, that had turned their backs on me at my time when I needed them most. But yet, every time they reached out to me, I was there. And so it was just like my whole, everything was against me, and so I put my gun to my head that night, and, I was squalling, I mean, inside, there was nothing. I was broken. I was shattered. I could not find a reason to live anymore. I'd lost everything. I'd lost my son, my house, everything I'd worked so hard for in this world to get. Everything was gone. Just like in a blink of an eye, everything was just gone. And when I put that gun to my head, the peace that came over me, knowing it's fixing to be over. The disappointment that everybody that I've given everybody, it's fixing to be over. I won't have to live my life no more disappointing them just over and over and over. This will be the one and final time to do it. And then they'll get over it and they'll go on about their lives just happy, and I'll just be a memory. And it was peaceful feeling. inside me. And I'm telling you, if you ever get to that point, you don't know what depression is until you get to the point where you're fixing to pull a trigger at your head and feel peace,
I can't
because
imagine.
you feel like it's a relief knowing you're fixing to die,
Oh my God.
you know. And that was one of the hardest moments in my life, you know. And I share it with no issues whatsoever, because other people might be there and they might be needing to hear it, They're not the only ones that's there, you know. And after I got done with all that, and yeah, I tried to pull the trigger. I did. I literally pulled it. The safety was not on that gun, but I pulled the trigger and the trigger wouldn't move. It was like the trigger was jammed. And the next morning I got out, because where I was staying at, I was living under a bridge right next to a little river. I got out the next morning and just pointed the gun toward the river, pulled the trigger, and it fired.
Oh my God.
Don't ask me how it happened. I don't know. It was a 9mm. You know, it was a Smith and Wesson. It wasn't no High Point or nothing like that. It was a good gun, and I don't know why it didn't fire that night. And I went on, you know, and uh, my current wife now, she met me while I was there, and she got to know me, and she opened her home up to me, brought me in, helped me out with gas money and food and everything else. And you know, I got back on my feet, and I told her, since she done that, you know, I was going back over the road, didn't have no reason to be at home no more, you know. And I I told her, I said, you know, I'm going back over the road. I said, if you want to go with me, you can. I said, you know, she said, well, I'd have to quit my job. I said, look, I know truck driving, and she has no kids. She can't have kids. So it was just me and her. I said, look, I said, quit your job, come with me. I'll support you. I'll take care of you. I'll be the man that I'm supposed to be. You know, the man's supposed to support his family. That's the way Daddy raised me. Because there again, when I was born, Daddy was 40 years old.
Mhm.
You know, so we skipped a generation, and I should have been his grandson, but yet I was his son. So he was old school tough, you know, and he was born in 38. And so I got that whole raising of the old school, you know, the man supports the household, you know, the woman takes care of the house, takes care of the kids, all that. And so that's why I told her, you know, and she trusted me enough to do it. And she got in truck with me. We lived 2 years in a truck, not knowing each other very well at all.
What an
And
introduction, right? Yeah.
yeah, you know, and after 2 years of living in an 8x10 box together and not killing one another, we decided, hey, this is gonna work. So we got married, and we've been married ever since, you know. And she's been my lifeline. She's been my backbone, the one I lean on. You know, she's been there, and I've had those relapses where I get real depressed and everything. And you know, and women don't understand, you know, when men say that men are supposed to support the family and women are supposed to be there to take care of the house. All right, you know, you hear that today and women will go crazy. But what they don't understand is it's not nothing bad that we're saying, because they don't understand how strong they are. You know, they're not physically strong like, you know, like a man is, even though I have seen some women that yeah, they could outdo me in a heartbeat, you know. But the men we're designed to get out and work. We're designed to do all the heavy lifting, the moving, the, you know, whatever needs to be done with our hands. That's what we're designed for. Women, on the other hand, have a much more important role. They're much stronger. The compassion, the caring,
Sure. Yeah.
right? You know, and well, it's kind of like in, you know, I'm a Christian. I've got saved back, you know, in October 26th, 2020. riding down the road. All this whole time, I never went to church, nothing else, never seek God, nothing else. I wasn't seeking Him. When He found me, He actually came to me. I wasn't
I
going
was
to
gonna
church.
say I could probably tell you why that
Yeah,
gun didn't go off.
yeah,
They're the guy
yeah.
upstairs, but yeah. Well, tell me that story. How did I didn't realize it was such only in 2020 that you got sick. How did you
Yes.
tell me that story?
Well, I was riding down the road, and my wife has had cancer one time before, and I was working with the same company, but at the time they had just started up, didn't have insurance, and so I had to go somewhere else. And then they finally got insurance, so I came back to them, and she ended up getting cancer again. The first time it was colon cancer. This time it was lung cancer, and um, it scared her because this time she had to go on the infusion chemo instead of just the little pill chemo. Um, so this time she called me and she told me, she said, I want to start going to church, because she had been raised in church when she was little and she had gotten out of it and stuff. And, you know, I went to church, but I didn't go to church. I went to, because I was the only child, my youngest brother's 14 years older than I am. I was raised the only child. Um, so I went for the interaction with the kids. It's the only reason I ever went to church. Um, so she told me she wanted to start going, and me and her got talking about it. I was in Ohio, riding down the road, and it was about 7:30 in the evening when we started talking about it. And I told her, I said, look, I said, I went to church with multiple people multiple times. I was looking for something when I walked in. I was looking for a message that touched me and all it. I said, I never got nothing out of church at all. And I said, look, I tell you what, I said, I'll go to church for you because you want to go. She's crying this whole time. You're passionate about it. You want to go. I said, I'll go to church for you, but I'm not going for me. I don't want nothing to do with it. And I flat told her, I said, you know, the things I've been through in my life, I've got my seat reserved in hell. I accept that. I'm ready to go. You know, a- and I was talking to her and got off the phone with her, and all of a sudden, I mean, I just felt this overwhelming feeling inside of me. It was just like that. I don't know how to explain it. It's undescribable, undefinable feeling, but I'd never felt it before. And it's just like everything inside of me just heated up. It's like I went from 98.6, 98.6 temperature to about 120 degrees that
Yeah.
quick.
Oh my
And
God.
I got pinned back in the seat. My hands fell from the steering wheel. I was locked in position. I couldn't move. The truck still running 70 mile an hour, and I'm locked in. I can't move. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling like, because I remember what it felt like when I put my finger in the light socket, because Daddy told me not to do it, and I done it. And then he told me, I
Uh,
bet you won't do that again. Yeah, well, I didn't do it again, but it felt like it. It felt like my entire body was just being electrified. And after that, I mean, I was squalling and like a little girl, like a little
uh,
2-year-old girl, just got her hand popped for touching candy she wasn't supposed to. And Bible verses started hitting my head. I said, I never picked up a Bible. I didn't learn the book. I didn't even learn the books of the Bible, much less anything in it,
yeah.
other than the simple John 3:16 that everybody hears. Well, I started getting Bible verses in my head, and I'm like, what, do what? And I looked it up on Google, and here's Bible verses and everything else, and the one that got me was Ephesians 3:8. Who am I less than the least of all saints, uh, to whom this grace is given? And and that hit me. Yeah, least of all saints was given grace,
Hmm.
and mercy. And here I am. I'm completely, completely of my life, completely opposite of the Bible. And now, you know, here's this verse. it's not John, it's not out of the Gospels like most preachers preach. You got to go to the Gospels and that's where you'll get saved. No, it's not. You'll get saved by the scripture that God wants you to get saved by.
Yeah.
No preacher can tell you what scripture is going to save you, because each one of us is completely different from the other. And it's just that message that comes across. A lot of people like to go to church and say, "Oh, you ought to come hear our preacher. He's anointed in this, or he's anointed in that." It's not the preacher that's anointed. The preacher's he's just the person that delivers the message. It's the message that's anointed, because he can preach the same message 3 weeks in a row, and the guy that just message church this week won't even get nothing out of it next week, but somebody else that it didn't hit the previous week will get it that week. It's the message that means something. It's not the preacher that's preaching it or nothing else.
At the right time in life too, right? You've got
Right.
different events that are yeah, I mean, I completely agree. That's amazing. And that's I know you mentioned that you're now becoming a pastor, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well,
That's, I mean,
I don't know about becoming a pastor yet, but at that moment, I called my wife, told her about it, squalling like crazy. She's laughing and squalling with me, but she's giggling. And so that weekend, we decided to go to church. Well, I know a pastor down the road. When we pull out our driveway, if we turn left, we go down the road to his church. I was going to go down there because I knew him. I got to the end of the road and I went to turn left, and I went right and went up the road to another church and walked in there, and yeah, that preaching was off the chain that day. And
all right.
so that's where we went. Well, like I said, the whole time I was planning on going somewhere else, but I just went with the feeling I had, I need to go this way. And that church offered Bible college. So I decided, I wanted to get into the Bible college. And, because at that point, with the feeling that I had, everything that I do now isn't because of me. I have no part in it. God puts me where he wants me at the time he wants me. And everything's because of him. He leads me, period. And if you'd have felt what I felt that night, you'd understand why. And a lot of people might call me crazy. I don't care what you call me. It's that feeling inside that I can't describe, and be honest with you, I never want to feel it again, because it hurt. You hear most people talk about, when they got saved, how joyous it was and wonder. No, sir, it hurt, because every bit of that emptiness that I had locked up, that numbness, everything that was behind that wall broke, and I felt the sorrow and the shame and the disappointment. I felt every bit of it on myself, not what I done to everybody else, what I done to me. And I felt that overwhelming, just that depression broke into a million pieces that night. And so, I got the opportunity to go to Bible college, and I did. I said, well, God wants me to go. And so I done it to learn more about the Bible, to get a deeper understanding of the Bible, rather than just open it up, reading a scripture or two, and then closing it and trying to put that into, because you can read one or two scriptures and you can make it mean whatever you want to. But the Bible has a specific meaning, and those scriptures are in context for a reason. And I went to Bible college so I could understand that better. And that's really the only reason I joined up. What God has planned for me after this, if he plans to put me in a pastoral role, that, hey, I'm following what he's got. I don't plan nothing. All I know is, right now, God just wants me to get a deeper meaning of the Bible. So that's where I'm at on
That's
that part.
amazing. That's amazing. And uh, I I've got a couple minutes before I need to get out of here.
Yep.
And so what I think, first off, thank you so much for sharing your story. That was something that really impactful for me, just hearing kind of everything that you've gone through, and hearing the also sharing the perspective of kind of what you were feeling in that moment, and I appreciate that. And I think one thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to another driver that's a friend of mine. His name's David Henry, that also is in the mental health world in trucking. And I think we get all three of us together and we have another podcast specifically about mental health, and just have a conversation like this, because this was super impactful. So, Jason, thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate you. And we will definitely have you on as a guest in the future. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Drive safe today, and we'll see you next time.
Trucking, big wheels there humming, high rate of fuel consumption, missing mama, needing loving, rolling with a wailing sound. Running like the Southern Shaker, I don't need no 40 acres to turn this rig around. I'm jacked up like a Chevy, but ain't heading to the levee. Lord have mercy sakes alive. On this high step and double clutching, gear jamming, chicken trucking, old school outlaw ride.